physical training, you have base, you have speed work, strength training, and taper. Now, there's two ways or two general ways that people kind of approach base training. You know, how do you take an athlete who is out of shape and get them in shape? Well, one theory is that, okay, for my athlete to accomplish, let's say, the Ironman day that they want to do, they're going to have to run a 7-minute pace for that Ironman. So, you know, it's the beginning of the year, the Ironman, let's say they've already qualified for Kona in October. So on their long runs, I'm going to start them out, and even though they're going to run an hour and a half or 2 hours at a relatively slow pace, I want to have some period in that training time where they're running their goal pace, 7-minute mile or 6-minute mile or whatever it is. And then, they'll only do it for 5 minutes. And then the next week they're going to do that pace for 10 minutes and then 15. So that's one way to do it. That's one theory, anyway, of how to get somebody ready. Basically, you start them with short periods within their key days where they're going their goal pace or slightly above it, and then you start to extend that out so that hopefully by the time they get to their race, they can maintain that pace the entire way. That's a great theory, but another way to do it is to build that internal aerobic engine first, build that endurance base first, and when I'm talking about endurance, aerobic engine, that is the ability to burn fat for fuel. Build that, and as their fitness finally starts to improve, their pace in their training starts to improve at their aerobic heart rates, then you start to add in that higher intensity speed work that then helps them to, again, achieve that goal of running a 7-minute mile or a 6-minute mile or whatever it is in the race. You know, think of it this way. If my goal is to run a 4-minute mile, okay, it's January or February, in October I have to run a 4-minute mile, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to go out today and run 1/4 at 1 minute pace? And then next week, 2/4, and the week after that, 3/4? What if I'm physiologically not ready? What if you are taking people who are not very trained and you have them go race pace, which is way above their current fitness level, even if it's for a short period of time, you're totally stressing their body and you're also risking injury. Okay? There's a lot of things that swimmers can do, there's a lot of things that cyclists can do that triathletes cannot get away with because the volume of training that triathletes are doing is very high. And the higher the level of training, even if it's low intensity, it adds to the stress in a person's body. You know, if the stress level is absorbable and you can recover, that's called the training effect. If it's beyond what we can recover day to day or week to week, that's called overtraining. You get injured, sick, or burned out. And that's nothing that we want to do. Now, aerobic training isn't really sexy. Okay? The aerobic base is what determines what an endurance athlete is going to end up doing on race day. Endurance physiologically is any event that takes longer than 4 minutes to complete. Okay, are any of your athletes going to complete their Ironman in less than 4 minutes? Okay. That's why a mile is actually one of the most difficult and challenging events on the planet because it is at the absolute limit of anaerobic capacity before you start to shift into aerobic capabilities. It requires patience to do this, though, because aerobic training is lower intensity than speed work, higher intensity. Aerobic training, you feel kind of good when you get done. You don't feel trashed. You don't feel like, you know, I really did a great workout. I did 12/4 on the track and I can barely move. They feel like you did something. You go out and you run at 150 beats a minute or 140 beats a minute for an hour, you may not feel like you've done much, especially if you don't have aerobic base. But again, aerobic training doesn't really have that sex appeal of power. You know, I'm going to do power intervals on my bike. I'm going to use my power meter. You know, well, what are you doing as an endurance athlete? I'm developing my fat burning engine. That sounds really boring. You know, so let me give it to you in a different light or different words, and maybe it will help you to understand what we're talking about with the aerobic engine. We, as endurance athletes, are trying to maximize our maximum fat-burning power, our maximum lipid power. I like that. Maximum lipid power. Wow. My coaches give me workouts that are going to help me develop my maximum lipid power. I like that. Maximum lipid power is a measure of the point where for energy we're using for fuel is coming from 50% fat and 50% carbohydrate. This is also your maximum aerobic heart rate. This number is so key because when you're training at or below that number, you are stimulating the body to get better at burning fat. When you exercise at higher than this heart rate, you're stimulating the body to get better at burning carbohydrate. Carbohydrate development gives you a little bit of improvement. Fat burning development gives you a huge improvement in fitness and endurance. This is also a key number because when you train at or below it, it's low stress. It does not cause a huge stimulation of the adrenal system. When you work out above that number, that heart rate, maximum aerobic heart rate, you're stimulating the adrenal system. You are turning on that fight or flight response. It is a high physiological stress in the body, and it takes longer to recover. Now, if your athletes live in a tent on the top of Pikes Peak and they have their food brought to them every day and they don't have a job or family or work, they could probably handle a lot of speed work and recover from it. But most of the athletes that I know that we work with have jobs, family commitments. They're not getting enough sleep anyway. And if I am throwing in tons of anaerobic work, physiologically, any workout that goes above their maximum aerobic heart rate, they are in adrenal stress. And over time, again, that person crashes. So this number, maximum aerobic heart rate, generally responds to, if you do a lactate test, 2 millimoles per liter. Okay? That's kind of like a very steady state. It's a very slow pace for most people. At this heart rate, you're getting about half your calories from fat and half from carbohydrate. Why is this so important for an endurance athlete to develop? The body can absorb about 350 calories an hour. Okay? You can exercise when you're going hard, like Ironman paces, you're burning about 700 calories an hour. Okay? So if your athlete in the Ironman is using all carbohydrate because they have no fat burning capabilities, how are you going to make up for that 350 calorie deficit every single hour for 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 hours? The only way to make up for it is to slow down. Is that making sense? At maximum aerobic heart rate, maximum lipid power, I love that. Maximum lipid power, you're getting half your energy from fat, 350 calories from fat and 350 from carbohydrate. Well, in the race, you can replace that 350 calories of carbohydrate you're using. If your athlete is way high, their heart rate's either high or they have no fat burning capabilities, they're burning more carbohydrate, they're burning 700 calories an hour from carbohydrate, let's say, then forget it, they're going to run out of gas. So that's why it's so important to develop this. A formula you've probably seen, you take 180, subtract your age, and then you change that based on a person's fitness level. If they've been sick for the past year, which hopefully the people you're working out with haven't been, you'd subtract 5 beats off that number. If they work out 2 or maybe 3 times a week for the past year, you leave it where it's at. If these people have been training fairly regularly, 3 or 4 days or more a week for a year or more, then you add 5 beats onto whatever that number is.